Discussion. Professor Michael Feuer is the Dean of the School of Education at George Washington University. He is also the President of the National Academy of Education in the United States, and he has been accompanying our project over the last 2 years or so. I think he's going to have a very good perspective and several comments that will make us all much the wiser, so please. I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity. You're laughing. Yes, I'm speaking in Hebrew. So soon you'll see what inequality is all about, between the effort and the outcome. First of all, I want to give you the warmest regards from our friends Richard Monet and Greg Duncan and Mike McPherson, who wanted to be here today, but it conflicts with Christmas. For me, it's no conflict, but for them, they could not come today, but they send you their warmest and kindest regards, and they're waiting for me to return to the United States and tell them what we had today and what happened here today. And that's why I have no intention of going back there. Since my Hebrew is a bit limited, I have good news. I won't speak long. As Elizabeth Taylor once said to one of her husbands, I won't keep you long. 4 points in my closing remarks, if I may. The first point is that, as we heard today, and I'd like to emphasize this, the problem of inequality is an international one. And it is very complex. And that is why we wanted this research to be in collaboration and cooperation with Israelis and Americans, but also with people from other countries as well. Since when we started thinking about this study, about this initiative, we really wanted to see what we could learn from cross-national collaboration. One might add that in terms of inequality, international inequality, I must tell you that in the United States we are very concerned about what would happen if one day we are in first place at anything, be it in math. That's impossible. Impossible in science. But in inequality, we have a pretty good chance. And it's a competition. So from what I learned today, and with all the process with my colleagues here in Israel, it's a pretty big contest between Israel and other countries. And therefore, it really should rise. This problem really should become top priority. The second point I want to make is that the Ford Foundation recently decided, by the way, Ford Foundation is number 2 in the world in terms of funds. They only have $12 billion in their asset base, which means that they give about $500 million per year to all sorts of causes. Now, Ford Foundation recently decided that inequality is the only top-ranking question or issue that they want to focus on. So, as I read yesterday in the New Yorker magazine about the Ford Foundation and their decision, so I'll only read out a short piece.
Ford had recently decided that inequality was the problem of the times, more than climate change or extremism. and it was going to do something dramatic. It was going to work on inequality and nothing else. So you are in good company. To the extent that there is some therapeutic value in universality, we should feel good that we are not alone.
And by the way, Mr. Ford, I don't know what he would have thought. First of all, that they're talking about inequality, and that they're talking about inequality in Israel. If he had been living here, he would have been rolling around in his grave, turning in his grave. Third point I want to make is this project is based on the study that Noach and Menachem mentioned. Wither opportunity, by the way, it's a play on words. Wither can mean where, and also it can mean disappearing. And we thought that this book and the papers and studies contained in it can serve as a good basis for seeing whether there is a framework, or whether within this framework there is something that can help in other countries. And I voted in favor of starting this project in Israel. And we need to emphasize that in With Opportunity, one of the aspects, and it's very interesting and important for all these discussions, and that is that we know that there is a link between inequality, financial and economic inequality, and education. But in With Opportunity, what was a bit new was to emphasize the connection from economic inequality that is taken for granted. We don't know exactly where it comes from. All the economists in the world are debating about this. But we know that there is economic inequality, and it's getting worse and worse everywhere. Another question is, what is the impact, what is the effect of economic inequality on opportunity in education, and particularly among children and students from a low socioeconomic background? And therefore, I feel that we should not wait until all the poverty issues are resolved and all the inequality, economic inequality problems are resolved before we invest in improving education methods, whether it's here in Israel or in the United States or in other countries. We should therefore find points of optimism, such as the paper and study of Ruth and her team, where they find that climate can somehow attenuate issues of inequality. If that's true, and I think it's based on very serious research and therefore I can accept it, this is an example of something that can be done while we're waiting to solve all the other problems of inequality. The fourth point I talked about Wither Opportunity. The second Dick Renee and Greg Duncan book is called Restoring Opportunity. And it's an important book. You should buy it. I will tell Dick that he'll go on holiday if you will buy his book. But you need to know that this book weighs maybe 100 grams. Wither Opportunity is a 5-kilo book. But I'm not saying this for nothing. In the history of social sciences, we have enough experience that we know more about the problems than about the solutions. But we don't need to be completely depressed by this. Rather, we should look for places, methods, and ideas that can perhaps help. And in restoring opportunity, there are 4 very interesting case studies on places in the United States, New Jersey, New York, doesn't matter, where they have made real efforts based on very serious research and found improvement in students' academic achievements and several other results. So, in terms of pessimism and optimism, and with that I will end, I had a rabbi who once said the difference between the pessimist and the optimist is that the pessimist has more data. So whether opportunity is this big and restoring opportunity is this big, and that makes sense in a way. And anyway, I don't agree, and I'm going to finish with a few sentences in English so I can get it almost right.
Almost right. Why do I actually disagree with that formulation of optimism and pessimism? It is because I actually see substantial data, substantial evidence that gives me reason to be hopeful about the future of education, especially in a time of growing inequality. And among the pieces of evidence and data that give me at least optimism about continuing in this field, it is this very remarkable passion and commitment on the part of education researchers and others to contribute from their toolkit, from their wellsprings of wisdom, to the general policy deliberations, to recognize that we have a role to play in this conversation, but that we are not the deciders. You just had the deciders here. And I can see why, from what I understood, I can see why the mood got a little bit more on the pessimist side as the afternoon continued. But still, for me, the evidence of this kind of collaboration between researchers and policymakers here, and I have to commend our friends in the Knesset and in the ministry for having had the willingness to take the risk with the Yozma, which is, of course, the brilliant establishment of Avital and now Noach and Menachem. But these are risky propositions to invite the research community to participate in these sorts of conversations. But that seems to be happening now more and more here. I wish it was happening more in the United States, where we have again, we are again confronting a terrible conflict between the politics of science and the science of politics. And we are, at best, having fights in the editorial pages of our newspapers without a lot of light, but with a lot of heat. But what gives me evidence and data to be more optimistic is this possibility of continuing this sort of thing. So I would go one step further.
My friends at Yad Hanadiv, I asked them a few hours ago to translate for me how you say to reaffirm the commitment. They didn't know why I was asking. So I would recommend that you continue to invest in such matters. It's one of the most important things you can do. And I would like to thank you. Good luck to you. Thank you very